It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Ulrike Sievers, who is a language and science teacher in North Germany and has been very active in teacher education, including in digital teacher education over the last years. And I'm really happy, or we are really happy to have her here as our host for modern languages. So I don't want to take any more time, and I will ask Ulrike to introduce herself and take us on the journey. Off we go.
Okay. Yeah, welcome. I'm very happy that I can be here, and I'm looking forward to be together with you for 3 sessions. I've been a foreign language teacher for 25 years now, and yeah, I have sort of developed my view on language teaching throughout this time, but also from observing people learning languages, from my own learning journey in languages. And I'm also active in teacher education in different parts of the world, as well as here in Germany. And I always like to do workshops like that interactive, as all the people know who have done that with me. So I really hope that you are willing and able to take part, and are also willing to actively engage in breakouts, even if you're not confident in the language, because that's just how our pupils feel. They are not always confident in the language we ask them to speak. So it's a very good experience, I think. Throughout these 3 sessions, I will focus on the different competencies that are needed for foreign language learning: listening, speaking, reading, writing, communication, but also social skills and personal skills that can be developed in the language classroom. Because I think it's most important to realize that English lessons or French lessons or Portuguese lessons are not only about learning a language, but they are part of the Waldorf curriculum. So they are part in the wish to help the pupils to develop in a holistic way. So we are not actually teaching a language, but we are using languages to invite pupils to develop, to invite pupils to find their own voice, to communicate with others. And I think that's always important to keep that in mind. Today, I will share some general thoughts about language acquisition, and then I will ask you to join me in some oral activities. And yes, now I actually wanted to bring you into breakouts, but I will change that because I was told that not everybody can participate in breakouts, but you can all participate in thinking yourself and sort of reflecting. And maybe we could do it that way, Sven, that you do breakouts, and if people want to join somebody else in a breakout, they can join a breakout.
Yes.
Where they can communicate in English, in which, however confident they feel there. And all those who don't want to participate, they can just stay in this room and do the task for themselves. Maybe write a little bit down onto paper or just reflect on your own. And those of you who want to talk to somebody else about it, they can join a breakout room. Is that possible?
Yes, that's not a problem. Yeah.
Okay. And I think we should do that for 8 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is that you think about and then share with somebody what you remember about learning languages yourself. So depending on how many languages you speak, what do you remember about learning languages at home, in kindergarten, in school, or later in your life? How did that work? What helped you to learn a language? What made it difficult? Just talk with somebody or reflect for yourself and just take some notes. What were the main steps in this journey of learning a language?
Thank you, Ulrike. I will open the breakout rooms now. And for those of you whose language is not catered, just try and see how else you could help yourself with understanding what is going on.
Yep.
And in about 8 minutes, we will meet each other again here. So you should all have received an invitation now to join the room. And if you haven't, I will assign you to somewhere. Thank you. Please keep accepting the invitations. That's wonderful. Works really well. I think it has worked that we have at least 2 in every room. So that's excellent. And I'm just going to stop the recording for a moment.
Welcome back. Everybody got back?
People are pouring in now, yes.
Okay.
Good. All good.
Okay, good. So, I hope you had interesting insights when you stayed with yourself or had a nice conversation. When the first Waldorf school started no, I was wondering when I wrote 2019. This seemed somehow strange. No. So 1919, when the first Waldorf school started in 1919, Rudolf Steiner introduced 2 additional languages to the language of instruction at that time. And I always find it really interesting that it were the languages of the enemies of the war that had just been raging before the First World War. So the language of instruction was German, and the 3 additional languages that school chose from was either English and Russian or English and French for the next years or decades in Germany. Now, for some time, also Spanish is a third language, the third language in many schools. And the idea was, this was also, it was interesting because it was a living language. So far, if children had learned languages in school, it had been Latin and Greek. And so it was now a language that you could use to communicate. And one aspect was obviously, or probably, that people should be able to speak the language. But something that was very important also at that time was that languages also open the possibility to look at the world in a different way. As each language is connected to a culture, usually, or one or more, or one culture has more than one language, but a language usually gives a certain perspective on the world, as each culture has a different perspective on the world, different traditions, different views and attitudes. And all this is transported in a language. So when we speak another language, it's not just the word and the grammar, but it's an attitude. It's a way of speaking. For example, in German, we have a language that uses a lot of nouns, so things, objects. Whereas in English, if you compare that, you use a lot of verbs. Things are done. And that's a different way of looking at life, I think, in some ways. So I think Steiner was hoping to also create an inner flexibility in children, and to create an openness when we meet other people and other cultures, that we do that with an open mind and in an empathetic way. Now, when we want children, and this is an aim that we still have nowadays, and it's also in a global world, it's very important to meet other cultures with respect, with openness, to be willing to look at their perspective of the world. And I think this makes it also obvious that if children are supposed to have a positive attitude at the other language, then language learning must be enjoyable. If you have terrible language lessons and you really don't like to learn another language, then you will hardly be open to the world, because then language learning is rather negative for you. So this is something that language teachers, I think, should always keep in mind, that the most important thing is that we create spaces in which children can develop a positive feeling towards learning a language and towards using a language and towards the language and the things we do in this language. So the idea at that time, which was different from learning Latin and Greek, was that the language acquisition in school should be pretty similar to how it is in life, how little children learn languages. And now I know that we are talking about teaching on learning from class 7 onwards in the upper school, but I think nevertheless it's important to remember how this is done, because in some schools, I was just in Belgium, they start a new language in class 7. So they also in class 7 have this question: how do we begin? How do we begin when we want to learn a new language? And from observing how little children learn languages, we can learn a lot about the process of language acquisition. I'm very lucky because I have 4 grandchildren and I can very closely observe how they learn a language. And what you see is that a language is usually learned in a context. Little children don't learn a language because somebody tells them they need to learn this language now. They are surrounded by the language, they are in the context of the language, and they want to participate. They want to understand the grown-up people they live together with. They want to communicate. They want to participate in the things that are going on. And they try to make similar sounds, they imitate, they find their own way of forming sound. And in the beginning, you probably all know that when you observe children, parents understand a language that other people don't understand. Parents know what the children want to say, even though the articulation is not really as other people use it. So little children use words that nobody else understands than their parents or their carers, the people around them. And then bit by bit, they pick up words, more words. For a long time, they pick up words, and then bit by bit, they put them together into sentences. And this might be a little bit different in different languages, but there is a certain universal process in that, so that words are important because they enable us to relate to the world and to the other, and that then grammar makes this communication more diverse. You can talk about the past and the future, and so it becomes a bit more complex. But you can do pretty much communication just with words. And we also can observe that children make mistakes, and sometimes they are very funny mistakes. So when they pick up that there are some rules for forming the plural, they use these rules with other words. And sometimes they even use 2 rules at the same time and produce very funny words and this is because they noticed here is some rule, but they haven't immediately grasped how it is applied. So they try out. And usually their surrounding is pretty friendly when they try out. And when they make mistakes, maybe somebody says it in the right way, but usually they are not sort of corrected or marked or something. So when we look at these principles of language learning, we can take something from that also for learning a new language. I rather say new language than foreign language, because foreign sort of places it somewhere else. So it's easiest to learn a language in context, or also what we heard from somebody in the room, learning through immersion. So being in the language, being in a family that speaks this language. And we also know that in many places in the world, in families, there are several languages spoken, and children are able to pick up 2 languages at the same time. The mother speaks the one language, the father the other, and they learn parallel 2 languages at the same time because they are immersed in this language. And the motivation is through the wish to communicate, to participate, and to relate to the world. What we also observe is that there is a long period of listening before the first production. So little children listen for a long time, and also in second language learning, pupils have a different need for listening. Some like to listen several years before they feel confident to speak their first sentences. It's always easy to connect language to doing. So not just have sort of abstract language somewhere out there, but to be in the language, to move in the language, to maybe even do sports in the language or cook in the language. So use the language in the surrounding, in the world. And because these are very motivating factors that help the children to acquire these often pretty difficult words and structures. Researchers have also observed which conditions are the best for learning a language and in an ideal setting. And you could, if you transfer that to the classroom, you could say the ideal language classroom is a classroom where somebody wants to understand what I try to say, as parents understand their children. And this somebody, hopefully the teacher at least, but also my peers, they try to understand what I say despite all the mistakes I make. So they just sort of ignore the mistakes and understand what I want to communicate. Also that somebody is interested in me as a person and not only in my language skills. So because language is something very close to our identity, to ourselves. A classroom should be a space in which I can try things out and make mistakes without being judged. Because the fear of being judged is one of the greatest obstacles of being brave enough to speak. So I'm just a bit confused because my shades went up here automatically somehow. Yeah. And then it's also important that it is a safe space. So in a social context, that nobody laughs at me, that nobody makes fun, that nobody corrects or insults me in front of others, so that I feel safe in a community where I can sort of use the language and try things out. And in a space where I can participate silently or listen until I feel safe enough to speak. So this creating a safe space is is a precondition of learning. And if we don't manage to create a safe space, it's not so much, we don't have to wonder why the pupils don't speak, because they are just sort of, they don't feel that they can try out, that they can make mistakes, that they can participate. When we look at the phases in language learning, we can observe that there is usually an oral phase. This has a different length. So that first the language is picked up orally before then it is written and you start to read. And we take that to Waldorf schools as well, so that we have, when schools start teaching the languages in class 1, it's usually 3 years of just oral movement in the language. And after 3 years, the pupils should be able to communicate with each other, to talk about their surrounding. Now, if we start learning languages later, probably this phase will be shorter, but I think it's important to to realize that we still need this oral phase, that we still need a phase where we can hear the language, where we can sort of listen to the language, be in the language. Now, if we ask this question, how can we be surrounded by language? Then in many settings, it's just the teacher who speaks English. And because often the teacher is the only one who is sort of fluent and confident to speak. Sometimes we have native speakers, then we can have a dialogue. But if the teacher does not speak the language, the target language, then the language is not there. So the teacher is the main source of bringing the language into the classroom, at least in the oral realm. And later it will also be books and literature and text, but the speaking is sort of what creates the space in which this language is used. So that's a very important thing. Now, the teacher shouldn't speak all the time because then it's boring for the students. So we speak, as Sven told while somewhere in the breakout, his teacher sang with them in English. So we can also sing together. And then we as a class create a language space. Or we can recite verses or play games or speak poetry. All these things bring language to the classroom. And they are all sources for us, for our mind to pick up the rules, the patterns of the language. Also, playing theater is a great way of bringing the language in the classroom, distributing the roles. Some people have a small role, some people have a bigger role, and everybody can participate, and we do communicate in the language with some help. Now, I observe that there is a tendency that once the children start to read and write, the teaching becomes very much focused on reading and writing. And often the oral activities, they become smaller, or teachers maybe even not spend any time giving space to the pupils to talk with each other. And I think that's a pity, because in the language, in speaking the language, the pupils can develop some confidence that using this language that they might not fully master yet, but they can use this to communicate. And communication and social interactivity is one very strong motivation in children, especially in teenagers. So I observe in my students, when I invite them to just communicate with each other, they are very happy. And when they do that in English, I'm very happy. Much happier than when they speak in their mother tongue about other things. So I try to include a lot of oral activities, of which we will also try out some very soon. And I think this speaking also comes with listening, right? We can't have a dialogue if we don't listen. And this listening and to the other and trying to understand is also a very important social skill nowadays. And that's why also I think it's worthwhile to use the language classroom to explicitly practice these listening skills. This trying to understand, trying to empathetically listen to the other person. And also come into a dialogue, find arguments, exchange arguments without fighting with each other, being able to see things from different perspectives when the pupils have a little bit more English skills. So also in puberty, so from class 7 on, we go into this phase of puberty or through that. And this is a time when many teenagers become very unsure of themselves and of their language. We have these teenage languages, and so they feel a bit insecure. They haven't really found their own identity yet, and language is very much connected to identity. So some people rather not speak, but some pupils also like to speak in another language because then they experience they are somebody else, whereas others are really scared of using a different language. So I find that class 7, 8 is often the time when everybody is most unhappy with language lessons. The pupils think they don't know anything, and the parents have problems having enough confidence in their children, and the teachers sometimes don't know what to do. So I think there it's even more important to find things that are fun doing together and that's enjoyable, but that's also safe. And this is also a time when the pupils have the feeling they don't understand everything. And so what is needed here is what we call tolerance of ambiguity, that I read a text, that I follow a conversation where I don't understand everything. And to cope with that, to live with this feeling, I don't know everything, but I know enough to understand, at least in general, what's going on. This is also a reason why in Waldorf schools we have this idea of not translating when pupils don't understand something, but of explaining in the language. So stay in the language and develop the confidence that we will find a way of understanding each other in this language. Okay, now I think you have listened for a long time. Now you need to do something. And I have written down, now I have two ways of accessing that. I have written down some exercises that I will post in the chat, and I will also post a link or a QR code if I manage to do that, so that you can access a Padlet, and on this Padlet you also find the activities. So depending on if you can access the Padlet, that's probably the best way, because there you can find everything. And I just have to find out how I upload that. Here, okay. A computer. Okay. Okay, that worked. So there's a QR code. With this one, you should get to a Padlet. You can use your phone, for example, and just open the Padlet. I can also post the link to the Padlet. And then after that, I will post the task. And it's a bit slow here. Okay. So it's an invitation to different activities. As I would do that in school, I would say form groups of 3. And in these groups of 3, you get different tasks from me. And usually each task is about 1 or 2 minutes of speaking. And so there are different kinds of tasks, which I maybe should also post that now. Just a second. Okay. Okay, now you find in the chat the instructions. So you would have groups of 3, and then you have different activities for each person. And I would just invite you to try this out. So describe your way from home to school, talk 1 minute about a tomato or any other thing, describe in detail how you cook spaghetti, rice, potatoes, depending on where you live. So that would be one sort of activity where people speak individually in little groups. And the other one would be more a game, that you are in a group and one person thinks of a famous personality, person, and the others have to ask questions that you can answer with yes or no. I guess you know this sort of game. And I would invite you to try that out, especially the one with the different speaking tasks, and just see how it feels and what you experience. And then after you've tried that out, you can share with each other in a breakout what you experienced when you played that. And maybe we can, Sven, we can also open that people can find their own breakout, and maybe
I
can write next to their name. I mean, UK is pretty obvious that it is English. So if you have your country in your name, then people can see which country you come from, which language you will probably speak. And then people can maybe group themselves.
I think that's, yes, I think that's a possibility. So the
and
way
the
we will
others
arrange
just
it.
look at these, and I think
Yeah.
there should be 10 minutes for that.
Okay, so you will be given a number of between 1 and 19, and you can drop yourself into that. And as Ulrike said, if you have some indication behind your name, which your original language is, that might help. Can I just clarify, Ulrike? Are you asking people to speak, to have those in conversations in the same target language, or can each of them choose their own target language?
I mean, it would be helpful if you understood each other, but if not,
Yeah.
we are very flexible. If you can
Okay.
also speak all your languages with each other, it might be interesting. Yeah.
But everybody tries to speak in not their native language. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that would be good.
Yes.
Yeah. So you
Okay.
get an
Great.
idea. Yeah.
So I have lots of rooms, and you should get an invitation now.
If you want to join, you just join a room. If you don't want to join, you stay here and do it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Okay. So some people obviously have come back already. Is that true, Sven? Are people coming back already?
Yes.
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 Okay. Good.
Mhm.
Okay. Is there somebody brave enough to share something that you experienced in your breakout? If you're only half brave, you could type it in the chat. If you're very brave, like Tuha Feni, then you can speak.
So mine is more of, we really didn't get to like a conclusion, more or less. I was in the midst of like explaining essentially. And so we're actually three in the break room, and I sort of posed the question of, let's say, because both had input in terms of having to have different kids of different levels be placed in one group to sort of make the whole teaching process easier. And so I asked, at my school, for example, we had an issue where we had different kids, different ages, same level essentially. And so like, how would you approach a lesson similar to that structure, right? You would have a 5-year-old and then a 10-year-old, all in the same group, same level of comprehension in terms of language, that is, but then different ages. So like, what would our approach be? So like, we're in the process of trying to break that down, and then obviously the break room came to an end, and so we never really got to an answer. And so if maybe we have a few more brave hearts out there who would be able to tackle this issue, that'll be really, really great, essentially.
Okay, thank you. So you're actually asking this question, or it's sort of behind that. What do you do? What do we do with big differences in class? And now this question is, do we group students on the same language level with each other, and then we have a difference in age? Or do we take a similarity in age, and then we have a huge difference in language level, right? Those are both possibilities, and they ask for different answers.
So like at my school, for
About
example,
diversity, yeah.
yeah, at my school, for example, we had both, like the both scenarios that you just touched on. We had different kids, different ages in one group, and then kids obviously with the same level of linked language in one group. And so like, how do we tackle both those scenarios?
Yeah, right. I will come to this question of differentiation or diversity, but it's also here the question. I don't have the experience with such a difference in age. I usually have mixed ability classes, so people on different language skills, and I experienced that in all these exercises they are absolutely happy together because it's a game, they are playing, nobody judges them, they don't have to perform in any way. They just speak with each other, and some have less words and some have more words, and they might help each other. And so yeah, there is no pressure of don't have to get anywhere, you don't have to achieve anything except for talking. I mean, that's also quite some stress for some people, but it's sort of, yeah. But it's interesting we keep that. I would keep that question and maybe come back to it in another place. Yeah, thank you. Any other experiences in these groups playing these or doing these tasks?
Yeah, I'd like to speak.
Yes.
I'm Jayanti from Bangalore, India. So we had South African, I think 2 Vietnamese, in 3 Vietnamese, if I'm not mistaken, and I was the 5th person in the room. Yeah. So we chose the topic, the trip from home to school. Yeah. Speaking about that, so they requested me to speak in Hindi because I'm a Hindi teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very strange because they asked me if I was teaching a foreign language, but in a sense it is foreign because I teach Hindi, which is a North Indian language in South India. India is broken up into different states, and so there are different languages, and it's almost like a foreign language. But I think the binding factor is Bollywood, that is the Hindi film industry. So there's a lot of Hindi films being watched, Hindi songs being heard. Even then, I think it's quite challenging for me to teach Hindi in Bangalore. But yeah, I'm trying different ways. So it was nice. We spoke on that one topic. I spoke in Hindi. Forgotten her name. Anne, I think, spoke in Afrikaans. I think is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. And except for some of the English numbers and the words, kilometers, 15, 20, everything was Greek and Latin. And then the Vietnamese was totally, I mean, completely different. So yeah, but it was so nice. I mean, we could hear so many different languages. So beautiful. Thank you. Very nice activity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So usually in my classroom, I don't have this very nice variety of languages, but I have a variety of people. That's also nice. And yeah, I think India is a very good example why we shouldn't call it foreign languages. I mean, there are so many languages just there, right? I think it's amazing. So they're all languages. Second, third, fourth, parallel. Yes. Anybody else would like to share something?
I would like to share something about the group activity where one person think of a person and then we ask question and that person will only answer yes or no. That is actually a game that I often play with my students, but I don't really go by just person because my students, they're younger and so we go by category, for example, animals, countries, food, traditional food or whatever. And it has always been a very fun game to play with them because they start thinking how to describe, how to ask that question. So in terms of language, they will be trying very hard to construct proper questions. And the person with the answer, instead of just saying yes or no, they will answer things like they have to pretend that they are the animal. Then they will say like, oh, no, I can't. Yes, I do. So it's actually very fun and cute. And yeah.
Okay, so you provide them with certain phrases that they can then use.
Yeah.
Yes, I do, I don't. And,
yes.
And that's a variation.
Proper,
Yeah, and depending on language level, it's also good to practice the questions before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The structure, the sentence, the question structure and the sentence structure will be, it would kind of give the kids some sense of security, like they won't go wrong, like they won't go too far.
Yeah, I think that's a good example also of this safe space, right? That we need to know where the pupils are about, and then we need to see how much scaffolding do they need, how much security do they need. So maybe we give them some phrases they can use, and if they feel they can do without, that's fine, but they can always come back to the phrases we give them so that they feel safe, they can do something, but they can also try to do more. Yes, yeah, very nice, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, I would go on, wait a second. No, that was just the wrong direction. Okay, so now these activities that I just shared with you, I would do at the beginning of the lesson for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just to get everybody speaking, to sort of get into the language. And at times we do poems, and at times we do songs, and at times we just do these games or exercises. Now, if we want to keep the oral alive and the speaking alive, there are also the possibility of having little talks. Let pupils prepare little presentations, little talks on different topics. And I think depending on the level the students have, but as soon as they can form some sentences and can understand some sentences because they are presenting that to the class, they can work on a little presentation on a book they have read, or maybe you talk about a certain country in connection with the language and they find a topic that they are interested in, animals in that country or sports in that country. So to find something that the students are interested in and can connect to, and then let them prepare something, either with the help of books you bring, or maybe there's a library where they can find something. So that's a question, which sources do we find? And then they can present something to the class. So then somebody speaks and the others have to listen. And when they are a bit more skillful, they can maybe take notes and sort of listen for some information. And in class, so when I talk about these classes, it's my English classes that might be different in other countries with other languages, but I do that in class 8 usually, that we maybe look at Australia or India or South Africa connected with English language, and then I let the pupils prepare a little presentation on a topic that they are interested in. Or in class 9, I let them do a little book review on a book they read at home, and they just present a book, maybe in connection with a little poster. In class 10, I like the topic of presenting heroes. So what are my personal heroes? We look at famous people, at Nobel Peace Prize laureates, and then they can say, who are my heroes? Who are the people I look up to? And they prepare a little presentation. Or we do news topics. So it can also be when in class 11 we look at newspapers, then they present a newspaper, a news topic that they found interesting. 2 or 3 minutes, something that they read on some newspaper website or in a newspaper, and they present that to the class, so that they always get used to presenting something, talking in the language to the class, and also get used to listening. And then it's this question of listening for information when you take notes. I think what's also when they are a bit more skillful, it's nice to have them make arguments, so that they have a little discussion. In English, I use debating. There are very strict rules how you put up a debate. Everybody has an argument, and they sort of they communicate or talk with each other, take turns in presenting their arguments. So they also learn to think critically and we are trying to develop the power of judgment in the upper school. So having arguments, con and pro, and taking other perspectives is also helping the young people to develop this, the power of judgment and the ability to take different perspectives. And now at the moment in class 11, I also integrated this question, are we brave enough to speak up for something? So is it sort of, are there topics that we really want to draw other people's attention to? So what do we want to change in the world? What's important for us? And they prepare a little speech and they deliver that in front of the class. I also do activities connected with the readers that we read. So oral activities, we talk about the images that come from a reader. So this is also inviting oral activities. And I made a collection of material on a second Padlet that I will also share in the chat in a minute. But I would like to stop here for a moment and just see whether you have any questions or anything that you would like to draw our attention to, or asked as a question maybe for today or also for the next two sessions. If there was something that you find unclear or that you think worth talking about.
You brought up the point of if they're brave enough to speak on what they are passionate about or what they believe in. And that can be very interesting, but that could also be quite controversial because some students may believe in something that is considered unethical or unright. And I think we all differ in morals. We can do our best to try to teach what's right and wrong, but these are human beings and they have their own opinions. So what do we do in that regard?
Well, I introduced this topic actually in a class that has quite some issues at the moment about speaking and respecting each other. We watched some TED Talks, which I think is for the upper school, for the upper classes, a very nice medium. So to bring in some media that bring in the language and the culture. And these TED Talks, I don't know if you know TED Talks, they also come in different languages. They are 4 to 18 minutes long statements by people, famous people and normal, ordinary people. And they sort of often talk about something personal experience that led them to some insight, and they have a message to the world. And we try to first to get an idea of this format. And now they are sort of working on giving their own message. And this is just the question, am I brave enough to speak up? Or the second version is, do I make a podcast? Then I don't have to speak in front of the class, but we do a podcast together or alone, and we just record it and then we share it on a Padlet, for example. But this is also the question, I think in class 11, it's this age where, this is a decision. Do I speak up? So if pupils in the class are treated unfairly, do I speak up or do I just watch? And I think it's just interesting to raise this question. It's not always comfortable for everybody. So I don't force anybody. If they say, I don't like that, sometimes I also, for example, say, okay, then you just choose 3 pupils and we go in another room and you just present it in front of these 3. Yeah, so, but I try to figure a little bit out, are they really afraid of that or not? But what I also say is nothing of this is allowed to be disrespectful, discriminating, and so on. So it's about positive messages. And I usually read their scripts before. So I make sure there's nothing in that. It's not always 100% guarantee, but since we have talked about that before, I have not had that situation that it was that something happened or somebody said something disrespectful. Up to now, I'm curious how that will be. Tomorrow and the day after, we will have the presentations. So it's the first class where I feel a little bit of tension about that. But usually they are very trusting and very open in listening. So I have very good experience with that, but you definitely need to look at the class and know the class. You can't do that with people you don't know. Yes.
So someone asked which grade I'm speaking about. I was speaking about grade 9, and we were doing something very similar where they presented speeches on, they were presenting speeches on people who have made a difference in the world that they admire. And I was just a bit worried because there were a few students who brought up some unsavory names, and I told them to please just run it by me who they were thinking of beforehand. And if they weren't, really good people, I would say, okay, well, consider what did they do that really made an impact on the world, or did they devote their life to bettering the world? And that changed it a little bit.
Yes.
But I was just wondering how to correctly go about that. So thank you.
Just be aware of that and say, I also had these people who changed the world, and now I added to the better. Because, I mean, there are these people who really make a change to the world, but we don't really want to have them as our heroes, right? So we have to be aware beforehand and see what they are working on. And as in my class, they are working on their speeches in class. And so I go and look and see what they are working on, so I have an idea what they're working on. And I would sort of at least collect the names of the people they're going to present. Yeah. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm teaching language arts for grade 7, 8, 9, 10, and we had a debate in grade 9, and there was a toss up between. So the classroom has ACs, and the school does not really have a policy of turning on these air conditioners. So some of the students decided to write a petition to the school working committee and asking that can we get the ACs on? So I brought that topic in, and I said those who were favoring the petition will be against the motion, and so the debate began. But the the student who was really vociferous, and she was, I want to sort of start a movement, and we have to make sure that the ACs work. She could not really form any arguments when it came when she was on the opposite side.
Yeah.
So she, in the middle of it, said that I'm done. I have nothing to say. And I rest my case. And she just stormed out of the classroom. And I said, okay, I think we need an AC to follow her. So now how do you sort of navigate these waters, that okay, they're in grade 9, they this developing their voice and they want to sort of really stand the ground, but when this happens, when the entire model of debating where you're able to sort of use persuasive speech falls flat, how do you sort of work with that?
Well, I think this is just what you're addressing is this question. If I have a way of teaching that I really pick up topics that moves the children, then there's always this balance. How far do I get? Does somebody get upset? Or I teach something that's so far out that nobody is really interested. So I would say it's an interesting way to pick up something that she is so engaged about, and now she can't do the other side. It's very challenging anyways to take the opposite's arguments, right? That's what's so difficult. And I think it's a good moment to talk about it. I mean, you can say, yeah, it is frustrating, right? I let the pupils, I do that in class 10, I let them choose a topic, and then they have to find counter arguments. This is frustrating because you have your opinion already. But this is actually what it is about. It's about changing the direction of your thinking in order to understand other people better. So I think you can address that and say, yes, that's what it's about, and it feels really bad. And maybe you try again, or you try another topic that is not so close to you, and you try again. It's a human experience, and we don't judge anybody on that. We just share it, as we saw now somebody who's really frustrated. And maybe you can find somebody who helps you to form good arguments. Right? These arguments, this debating is also always prepared beforehand. It's not sort of stand up. It's, and I think, I mean, hopefully she is not traumatized for life, but she had one bad experience, and you could also talk to her and see, okay, what can we do about it? Yeah, can we find a way? Do we want to have another debate? Do you want to try again? Do you need somebody who supports you? Just address it openly, I would say, because we're dealing with young people who try to find their way. And you could say, no, you can't have a petition to the world, to the school, but this would also not be the right way. It's good that they try, and that they try to have different arguments, and maybe it makes their vision even stronger when they understand the arguments of the other side. Could also argue like that. If we understand the arguments of our opponents, we become stronger, because we can find stronger counter arguments.
Yeah.
The question is, I think, the question of the age. When you do that, they need a certain language ability. Even though I differentiate in class 10, I have some pupils where I said, okay, you speak for like half a minute, or everybody at least have to speak 3 sentences. And I have pupils where I said, okay, each of your arguments needs to be 2 minutes, because they are really good in English. So we can sort of differentiate the tasks a little bit to enable everybody to fulfill the task. I think that's always important for acknowledging the diversity there is. Yeah, any other things?
I have a small request, just being aware that we're going towards the last 5 minutes.
Yes.
And that is, if you, before we finish today, could briefly sort of say what the themes for you will be for the next 2 sessions. Because I loved the fact that it was all about speaking and listening today. I thought that was a really good way in. I really enjoyed the way you structured that. But you don't have to do it straight away if you don't want.
Well, I can. I thought, I mean, the Padlet that I just shared now, it's material Padlet, and I will add to that. Now, the first column has a lot of material for speaking, related to readers, and also other things. And next time I would more focus on working with literature and text and poetry, and see what we can do there. How we can integrate that. I would also, from what I now heard, address the question of differentiation. So how do you work with classes that have very different skills and abilities? Because I think that's always a very important aspect. And working with readers includes reading and writing. And yeah, so I would look at different ways of, from class 7 to class 12, working with readers on different levels, also independent working, and yeah, sort of the whole field of that. And in the third session, I also thought about taking in questions that come and look at that. But otherwise, I would also see how can we integrate different media. How can we have tasks in which we change media and just add to media education through foreign language learning, but also make use of this huge field of media that's a really great help for the upper classes for language teaching, and see what's the Waldorf approach to media. And when I say media, I mean analog and digital. So books as well as films, and yeah, so that was my plan, but I'm also happy to adjust my plan according to wishes and questions. And I always like to invite you to do things and to try things out. And also when you look at the material and have any questions, you can also ask the questions next time, or you can also write them in the Padlet. I think there is a comment function, and then I can also answer that.
So maybe just for those of you who haven't done that yet, you could try that out quickly to bring up the Padlet, and rather than read it all now, just click the little star in the top right corner and bookmark it for later so that you don't lose it. Because when the meeting is closed, of course, you won't be able to see the chat anymore. So that would be the moment to do that.
Yes, and there's also a QR code for the second Padlet. Right. Yeah, okay, so I think maybe for the last few, if you have any questions, would be good if you post them in the chat. And then if Sven saves the chat before he closes the Zoom room.
Yes.
Good.
I'm happy to do that, yes.
Okay, and maybe just to take something with you, is this question, I just formulated some questions. So when we think of ourselves as language teachers, do we meet our pupils with such supportive and understanding attitude? Do we take the time to let them listen until they feel safe enough to speak? Do we understand them despite of the mistakes they make? Do we encourage them to try and value their contributions independent of their language accuracy or correctness? Do we make sure that nobody laughs about others? That nobody feels ashamed of making mistakes? That everybody feels in a safe space in which the pupils had the chance to develop trust in their teacher and can rely on the teacher's positive and supportive attitude towards them? So do our pupils have the feeling that they are heard, seen, and understood? And I think this is something that's pretty worthwhile asking ourselves, and I say our because I also have to do that regularly. Because I think learning languages is a very vulnerable space, because languages are so close to our heart. And so we really need to make sure this is safe. And because as all Waldorf attitude towards teaching, it's about the pupils. And sometimes I notice we are getting nervous on whether they learn enough grammar and languages and words and structures and things. And so that makes us sometimes forget the pupils. And I think that's good always to look at that again. So how can we help young people to develop, to feel confident, and even use another language and get into contact with other people? And yes, I think that's something that will also enable them to learn the language much better, because it's also research shows that when we feel safe and when we are in a friendly atmosphere and feel positive response, our whole learning system is much more alert and works much better. Okay, so much.
Thank you very much, Ulrike. It was a lovely, rich session, and I was very pleased also that so many people joined us for the first time today. That was very encouraging to see. So a lovely big meeting. Some new countries represented here, many new languages for us and each other. And so we hope to see you again next week. And for those of you who are here for the first time, we always finish these meetings in the same way, that everybody unmutes themselves and says goodbye and thank you in their own languages. So thank you again, and see you next Wednesday.
Yes.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dhanyawad.
Salamat po.
Maraming salamat.
Namaskar.
Ciao. Obrigada.
Adios.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.